Um, what if the quietest, like, most awkward moments in your life aren't actually signs that you said something wrong,
Right, yeah.
but, proof that your brain just processed reality way faster than the room could
Yeah,
handle?
absolutely. It's a very specific, uncomfortable feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever been sitting in a meeting or maybe navigating one of those really tense family dinners?
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. And you casually share an observation, not an aggressive opinion, not some political hot take, or just a genuine, crystal clear insight about the root cause of whatever is going on.
Yes.
And instead of everyone saying like, wow, great point, the entire room just goes completely deafening quiet.
Yeah, and it is a highly specific, almost suffocating kind of silence.
Totally.
I mean, it is definitely not the silence of a group of people pondering a profound truth.
No, not at all.
It's this defensive, highly charged silence of a social ecosystem that suddenly feels, well, exposed. It's like the sound of a group's psychological immune system kicking in.
Yes, that is exactly what it feels like. And your immediate physical reaction to that silence is panic.
Oh, instantly. You go into flight mode.
You really do. You want to backtrack, You want to throw out a self-deprecating joke, soften your tone, and essentially apologize for having 20/20 vision.
Exactly.
So if you are joining us for this deep dive, you are likely someone who loves gathering knowledge, synthesizing information, and, connecting the dots.
Which means they've definitely experienced this.
Exactly. Which means you, the listener, have almost certainly hit this invisible wall. So our mission today is to explore a profound philosophical framework that explains exactly why society constantly pressures us to basically dumb ourselves down.
And it's such a pervasive issue.
It is. More importantly, though, we're going to break down how you can stop erasing your own intelligence while still remaining deeply connected to the people around you.
So, to even begin untangling this, we have to establish a foundational distinction regarding how we view our own intelligence.
Right.
We need to separate humility into two completely different biological and social categories.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So first, we have what we'll call healthy humility.
Here.
Healthy humility is an epistemological stance. It's simply the recognition of the limits of human cognition.
Like knowing you don't know everything.
Precisely. It's that grounded awareness that no matter how much you know, you are operating inside a vast, complex universe, and there is always going to be more data to process. It keeps your mind malleable and open.
Right. And that is the gold standard, isn't it? That's the lifelong learner mentality where you are confident but curious.
It is. But the flip side of that coin is something far more insidious, which operates almost entirely under the radar.
And this is the forced humility.
Exactly, forced humility. And it isn't about remaining open to new information at all. It is a systemic social compliance mechanism.
Wow.
Yeah. It's the quiet, implicit pressure to actively diminish your own experience, your clarity, or your perception,
Just to make everyone else feel better.
strictly to manage the anxiety of the people around you. It is this unwritten rule that if your clarity makes the group uncomfortable, it is your responsibility to pretend you don't see the elephant in the room.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what is so incredibly dangerous about forced humility is the absolute invisibility of its enforcement.
Yes, it's totally silent.
Nobody pulls you aside and hands you a formal memo that says, hey, we're going to need you to reduce your processing speed by about 40% for the remainder of this dinner party.
Right, that would be absurd.
It's entirely nonverbal, isn't it?
Yeah.
It relies on the psychology of normative social influence.
It relies heavily on it. Groups enforce their baselines through these incredibly subtle yet highly punitive microcorrections.
Like what kind of corrections?
Well, you'll notice someone abruptly dismissing a structurally sound idea without actually engaging with the premise.
Oh, like they just wave it away.
Exactly. Or, even more commonly, the group will subconsciously reframe your clear insight as a personality defect.
Like calling you difficult.
Right. They will label you as arrogant, intense, or a know-it-all simply because you're speaking with certainty about a pattern you've directly observed. The group basically treats clear perception as a breach of social etiquette.
That is wild. I mean, it's like having 20/20 vision, but actively choosing to wear blurry glasses just so your friends don't feel bad about needing a prescription.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And it's like running a massive, heavy background app on your smartphone just to keep the screen dimmed. You have this high-powered processor, your brain, that has correctly analyzed a situation.
But you can't use it.
Right. Instead of using that energy to move forward, you have to redirect a massive amount of cognitive load toward actively suppressing your own neural pathways.
Which is incredibly draining.
You are draining your own battery just so your friends don't squint from the brightness. The friction there has to be totally exhausting.
The energy cost of that friction is staggering. And it leads to a state called self-experienced erasure.
Self-experienced erasure.
Yes, and the term is vital because it highlights the internal mechanism of the damage. You aren't being physically removed from the room, right?
Right.
And you aren't actually losing your intellect. But the authentic expression of your perception is being systematically overwritten by a performance.
A performance to fit in.
Exactly. The cognitive dissonance is profound. Your brain has processed the data, you know a truth based on direct experience, yet the environment demands that you manufacture a mask of confusion.
You're acting.
You are actively participating in your own gaslighting just to remain socially palatable.
Man, that is bleak. And the most fascinating part of this framework is when this pushback actually happens.
Oh, the trigger is very consistent.
Right. It almost always occurs when someone starts pointing out how things are interconnected.
Yes.
But let me push back on this premise for a second because I think it's really easy to misinterpret.
Sure.
Wait, if someone starts talking about how everything is connected, biological systems, ecological networks, shared consciousness, shouldn't people love that?
You think so?
It sounds so unifying and peaceful. Like if I walk into a boardroom or a family gathering and I start announcing that I alone see the grand interconnected matrix of all our problems, doesn't that easily cross the line into narcissism?
That's a really valid question.
I mean, how do we know we aren't just being arrogant and using clear perception as an excuse to talk down to people?
What's fascinating here is the mechanistic difference between narcissism and genuine perception.
Okay.
Narcissism is fundamentally about elevating the self above the system. A narcissist actually relies on fixed hierarchies and boundaries because they need to be positioned at the top of them.
Oh, I see. They need the structure so they can win it.
Exactly. They want the boxes to remain intact.
Yeah.
But clear perception, specifically the recognition of interconnectedness, is about seeing the system itself and realizing that the boundaries separating us are largely artificial.
So you're not trying to be the boss of the system.
No, you aren't placing yourself above the network. You're simply pointing out that the network exists.
Okay, so the narcissist says, I am the most important thing in this room, whereas the clear perceiver says, everything in this room is affecting everything else.
Exactly. And while that interconnectedness sounds beautiful and unifying when we read about it in poetry or philosophy,
Right, in theory, it's great.
it is perceived as a massive existential threat to the way we organize our mundane, everyday lives.
Because it messes with our roles.
Think about the architecture of human social structures. They are entirely dependent on rigid boundaries, isolated identities, and stable roles.
Yeah, we like our neat little categories.
We need to believe that I'm the boss and you are the subordinate, or this department's failure has nothing to do with my department's success, or I am the strictly rational thinker and you are the overly emotional reactor.
We cling to those labeled boxes like a life raft, because if the boxes are real, the world is predictable.
They provide a profound sense of psychological safety.
So when you mess with the box,
So, when you start speaking clearly about interconnection, when you point out that a behavioral issue in a child is actually a symptom of the parent's unspoken marital tension, or that a company's dropping sales are a direct reflection of a toxic executive culture, you are dissolving the walls. You are threatening the structural integrity of their reality.
and people will fight to the death to protect their walls.
They absolutely will. This is where the concept of the spiral of silence comes into play.
The spiral of silence.
The group subconsciously recognizes that your insight threatens the established order. So the social immune system mounts a defense.
They freeze you out.
The collective sends a freezing, unified signal, basically. Do not speak too clearly about what you see, because it disturbs the fragile framework we have all silently agreed to pretend is real.
Wow.
If you break the illusion, the group no longer sees the problem you are pointing out. They only see you as the problem.
So we find ourselves trapped in this incredibly hostile loop. We are standing in the room, our brains have accurately mapped the interconnected reality of the situation, and the social ecosystem is implicitly threatening us with isolation unless we agree to play dumb.
That's the trap.
But since we just established that suppressing our perception creates this exhausting cognitive dissonance, the self-erasure that rots us from the inside out. How do we break the cycle?
It takes work.
How does a person actually live with truth in a world that is heavily incentivized to resist it?
It requires a fundamental pivot in how we approach the concept of truth itself. And the first step is entirely internal, and it demands two specific traits: courage and discipline.
Courage and discipline.
The courage is required simply to stop the self-gaslighting. You have to be brave enough to look at the raw data your brain is giving you and say, I see this, without immediately submitting that perception to the jury of social approval.
You have to back yourself up first.
You have to validate your own sensory and cognitive inputs, even if the rest of the room is aggressively looking the other way.
But courage without discipline is just recklessness, right? That's where the arrogance you mentioned earlier could sneak back in.
Precisely. And that is the function of the discipline. Discipline is the scientific method applied to your own intuition.
Okay, I like that.
Once you have the courage to acknowledge your perception, you must have the discipline to mercilessly examine it. You question it, you look for your own blind spots, and you refine it over time.
So you don't just assume you're perfectly right from day one.
No. Recognizing that your direct experience is a legitimate source of data does not mean you instantly possess the infallible, absolute truth. Truth is not a static object you hold. It is an unfolding process.
It evolves.
It requires immense patience because what feels like an absolute certainty on Tuesday might reveal itself to be just a partial, fragmented insight by Friday.
Here's where it gets really interesting, at least from a behavioral standpoint. Because once you establish that internal baseline of courage and discipline, a massive paradigm shift occurs from the text.
A huge shift.
We have to learn to sever the neurological link between two things we constantly confuse: expression and validation.
This is arguably the most critical mechanism in the entire framework.
I really want you, the listener, to internalize this distinction, because it is literally the ultimate cheat code for social anxiety.
It changes everything.
Expression is simply the biological and cognitive act of embodying what you understand to be true. It's speaking the reality your brain has processed.
Right.
Validation is the external consensus, is a room nodding their heads and giving you a gold star. And we are socially conditioned to collapse those two things into a single event.
We treat them like they're the same step.
Right. We operate under the assumption that if I speak my truth and the room rejects it, then my expression was a failure. But the reality is these two mechanisms are not synchronized.
They operate on entirely different timelines, and quite frankly, sometimes they never intersect at all. The profound, liberating realization here is that a person can live truthfully, express themselves with total authenticity, and maintain their psychological integrity even when applause is completely absent.
You don't need the gold star.
No. Your perception does not require a Democratic majority vote to be valid.
It's incredibly freeing. But, it also presents a fascinating logistical problem.
How so?
Well, if we genuinely don't need external validation, and we know that social spaces are structurally hostile to clear perception, what stops us from just walking away?
Right, the hermit option.
Yeah. Why not just say, forget society, move to a cabin in the woods, and enjoy our unfiltered 20/20 vision in total isolation? But we can't do that, can we?
No, we can't.
Because we just spent the last 10 minutes establishing that everything is deeply interconnected. We are fundamentally biologically relational beings. We can't just opt out of the human network.
You cannot use interconnectedness as a philosophical excuse to permanently disconnect. It's a paradox.
So what's the middle ground?
So the practical challenge becomes, if you are holding a complex truth and you need to remain in relationship with the people around you, but you know that forcing your unvarnished insight onto them will trigger their psychological immune system, what is the mechanism for moving forward?
Right.
The solution is a process called translation.
Translation. I love the mechanics of translation.
Yes,
It moves us away from this idea that we just have to bluntly bludgeon people with the truth.
Exactly. Translation is the empathetic understanding that you cannot take a highly complex, multi-layered insight that took you months to process, drop it directly into someone else's lap, and expect their nervous system to instantly assimilate it.
Their system just rejects.
You have to translate your perception into a format that their current cognitive framework can actually read.
It's like serving a rich, complex meal.
Yeah.
You don't shove the entire feast at someone all at once, You serve it in approachable, digestible courses.
That's a great way to look at it.
Or it makes me think of trying to send a massive, heavy 4K video file to a smartphone from 2012.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just airdrop it. The older operating system will literally crash trying to open it. It will freeze.
It doesn't have the processing power.
Right. You have to compress the file, you have to change the format, break it down into smaller, digestible packets of data, and send it over in a way the receiving device can actually render.
That is a perfect mechanistic analogy. You are modifying the delivery system without altering the core data. And there are highly effective methods for this kind of cognitive translation.
What are some of the methods the text mentions?
The most powerful one is storytelling. From a neurological perspective, humans are hardwired for narrative.
We love stories.
When you present a raw fact that challenges a worldview, the brain's amygdala flags it as a threat. But when you wrap that same fact in a story, it acts as a cognitive Trojan horse.
Oh, that's clever.
It bypasses the defense mechanisms because the listener is focused on the narrative arc, not the threat to their identity.
Analogies do the exact same thing, don't they? You map a terrifying unknown concept onto a safe, familiar one.
Yes. Careful, measured explanation is a form of translation. And sometimes, the most advanced form of translation is simply the patience to say nothing at all.
Just waiting.
It is holding the insight and waiting for the precise environmental conditions where the receiver is naturally open to hearing it.
Which means you have to be an expert at reading the room. Not every social environment has the bandwidth for high-level translation.
Very true.
Like, if you were in a brainstorming session with a secure, curious mentor, their operating system is updated. You can send the 4K file.
Yeah, I can handle it.
But if you are in a deeply entrenched corporate hierarchy that strictly enforces conformity, you have to be highly strategic about where, when, and how you speak. Translation is the ultimate exercise in situational awareness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all of these mechanisms, the internal courage to see clearly, the discipline to refine your view, the decoupling of expression from validation, and the empathetic art of translation, they are all driving toward a specific psychological endgame.
And what is that endgame?
That endgame is internal coherence.
Internal coherence. It sounds like a state of flow.
It is the ultimate state of psychological alignment. Internal coherence is achieved when your perception, your internal monologue, and your external behavior finally sync up.
No more masks.
You completely abandon the exhausting practice of splitting yourself into two distinct entities: the silent observer who knows the truth, and the dancing puppet who performs ignorance just to secure a seat at the table.
That sounds like a huge relief.
When those two fractured halves merge back into a single coherent self, something almost magical happens to your nervous system. The social pressure of the room instantly loses its gravitational pull.
Because you are no longer fighting a civil war inside your own head. The cognitive load drops to zero.
Precisely. You no longer require self-erasure to remain physically present with other people.
Yeah.
You can sit comfortably in that awkward, silent room, deeply grounded in your own understanding, without feeling the desperate, panicky need to either conform to their blindness or aggressively force them to see exactly what you see.
You just let them be.
You can respect their current stage of cognitive development without sacrificing your own.
So what does this all mean? It means we have to completely and utterly redefine the concept of humility based on this text.
We really do.
True humility is not about playing dumb. It's never about pretending to know less than you actually do just to soothe someone else's ego.
Never.
True humility is the ability to hold your understanding firmly, to speak your clarity without apology, while simultaneously keeping the door wide open to new data, correction, and dialogue.
Humility and clarity are not mutually exclusive. In a fully actualized mind, they are symbiotic.
They feed each other.
The very realization that your hard-won knowledge exists within an infinitely complex, interconnected universe that no single human brain could ever fully map. That is what naturally generates humility.
Yeah.
You don't need to artificially shrink yourself to be humble. The vastness of reality does that for you.
And when you start living with that kind of internal coherence, there's this beautiful, almost invisible ripple effect that happens.
There is. When you balance unapologetic clarity with genuine openness, you eventually discover that the truth you've been carrying isn't quite so isolating.
Right.
Even if a group vehemently resists an unfamiliar truth on Monday, the mere introduction of that concept alters the ecosystem. Understanding moves.
It spreads.
It percolates slowly through networks of casual conversation, quiet reflection, and shared lived experiences. Because we are undeniably interconnected, an insight never remains the sole property of one individual.
It gets absorbed into the shared biosocial field. It's like a single drop of incredibly concentrated dye hitting a glass of water.
Oh, that's a good visualization.
For a second, it's just a tight, isolated dot of color.
Yeah.
But you don't have to stir the water. The physics of the system will naturally disperse it until the entire glass changes shade. It just takes time.
Exactly. Holding on to truth becomes less about standing on a lonely pedestal screaming at the masses, and more about quietly participating in the slow, inevitable unfolding of collective awareness.
Participation, not domination.
You refuse to disappear, but you also don't demand that they immediately catch up. You are all moving together toward a clearer baseline of perception.
So to bring this all together for you listening, the next time you are sitting in that room and you share a genuine insight and that heavy defensive silence descends like a fog, do not retreat.
Stand your ground.
Do not scramble to put the blurry glasses back on. You do not need their immediate verbal validation to know that your processor is working correctly.
Right.
You can maintain your internal coherence. You can pivot into the role of patient translator. And you can trust that truth moves through the network on its own inevitable timeline.
It is about cultivating a quieter, infinitely more powerful form of presence. Knowing exactly what you see, translating it when the sister can handle it, listening when necessary, and permanently letting go of the fear of your own erasure.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over that builds on this source material. We've talked extensively about how truth spreads slowly through networks and how we must patiently translate our insights to help others assimilate them. But consider the deepest implications of interconnectedness.
Let's hear it.
If human beings are truly fundamentally linked as biological and social systems, what if your silent internal coherence is actively rewriting the social rules of your immediate circle right now, even before you utter a single word of translation?
Wow.
Think about the sheer gravitational force of a human being simply standing in their truth without a hint of apology. What if simply refusing to be erased is, in itself, the most powerful translation of all?
That's incredible to think about.
So the next time your clarity makes a room go dead quiet, maybe that silence isn't a rejection. Maybe it's just the sound of the entire room forcefully recalibrating to your frequency.